Bettie Baca has done some amazing things. Um, she lives in Virginia now, um, but she's originally from Colorado, and she's got some stories to talk to you about Colorado, and they're really kind of neat. But I want to highlight some of her accomplishments. Um, she was counselor to the ambassador of the Small Business Administration. She also served in Congress as the executive director of Congress of the Congressional Caucus, the Hispanic Congressional Caucus. Uh, the U.S. Department of Commerce senior aide to, that's Ron Brown. She also graduated from Office of Personal Management, OMP. She's always worked and given back to the community. She has helped people get jobs. She is currently organizing some uh, job placements for day laborers out in the burbs. So with all the experience she has and all of the things she does, she really gets down and works with the community. And that's what I think so much of Ms. Baca. So she's got a great story. She's going to talk to you about this, and you're in for a treat. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hello, DC Rotary. This is Hispanic Heritage Month. You probably knew that. I'm Bettie Baca, the daughter of Mexican Americans from New Mexico and Colorado, the daughter-in-law of a Black woman from Puerto Rico, the great-granddaughter of an unknown Native American woman, and the great-great-niece of the man who introduced sheep to Colorado and for whom Baca County was named. There are approximately 65 million Latinos in the country, 80% of whom are citizens. Surprised? And more than 36 million of whom are eligible to vote this year. They come from the Americas, the Caribbean, and from Europe. They grow our food, mow our lawns, make our laws, teach our children, participate in, and contribute to all facets of American life. It's Hispanic Heritage Month, which we celebrate each year from September 15th to October 15th. Today, I speak for and about all of us, those who've been here for years and those who just came across. This national recognition began in 1968 when California Congressman George E. Brown suggested that the country formally acknowledge the contributions of Hispanic Americans. That same year, Congress introduced and President Lyndon Johnson signed a resolution designating a week in September as National Hispanic Heritage Week. By design, the week was to include September 15 and September 16, because that was when several Hispanic countries gained independence from Spain. They are Mexico, which included a great part of this country, the entire Southwest. That was in 1810. And Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica in 1821. Now, it wasn't until 1987, nearly 20 years after the original proclamation, that a dear friend, the late California Congressman Esteban E. Torres, introduced House Resolution 3182 that would amend the law to create National Hispanic Heritage Month. But now it would compose parts of 2 months, September 15 to October 15, to include the national holidays of more Hispanic countries. But Congressman Torres wanted the observance extended so that the nation could, in his words, properly observe and coordinate events and activities to celebrate Hispanic culture and achievement. The bill was introduced more than 6 months before the Senate bill, but it was stalled in subcommittees, and there had been no action for months. I was executive director of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus at the time, and so it fell on me it fell on me and my small staff of 4 to do something. I assigned the task to my intern, Robert Lopez, a Mexican-American college student who would work with Margarita Roque, my legislative director. The bill had little more than 100 signatures, but it would need at least 50 more in order to get to the floor for a vote. Robert started cold calling members' offices. It wasn't easy. Some said we shouldn't be celebrating ethnic holidays. We're all Americans, they said. Others wanted the constituents to come to them and ask for it. And still others just didn't want to do it. We decided to concentrate on the states with large Latino populations like Texas, California, and New York. We got the support of the Congressional Black Caucus and other like-minded members. And on August 8th, 1988, H.R. 3182 passed by a voice vote. On September 14, 1989, President George H.W. Bush became the first president to declare the 31-day period from September 15 to October 15 as National Hispanic Heritage Month, which we celebrate now. So, who are and I hope y'all are doing that this month. So, who are these Hispanics that we celebrate every year? I said we already come from many places around the world. Some have been here hundreds of years, others just arrived. But what do we have in common? How are we different? Why are we here? Some of us have always been here. We were part of the nation's expansion into Spanish territory in the 1800s. Florida by 1820, the Southwest U.S. by 1855, and Puerto Rico in the late 1800s. We are the people who never crossed the border. The border crossed us. They wanted our land, but they didn't want us. Native Americans were sent to reservations. Mexican Americans, mostly Catholic and mestizo, which is Spanish and Indian, became second class along with Indians and Blacks. My grandparents, Nazario Baca and Pablita Martinez, married in the territory of New Mexico in 1911, and I have their original marriage certificate. My great-great-uncle, Luis Felipe de Jesus Baca, founded the city of Trinidad, Colorado. In 1870, he won a seat as a Republican in the Colorado Territorial Legislature. Felipe's uncle, Juan Antonio Baca, was elected to the Colorado Senate in 1878. And there wasn't another Baca in the Colorado legislature until my sister, Polly Baca, a Democrat, was elected to the Colorado House in 1974. 4 years later, she became the first minority woman state senator. For a number of reasons, my family did not inherit the wealth of those who came before. The land rights of the Spanish-speaking who did not transfer once the Anglo-Americans took over. It had been customary in the farm agricultural culture to pay taxes on the produce of the land, but the Anglos found a way to tax the land itself, which the farmers could not pay. Growing up in racist northern Colorado was difficult in the 40s and 50s. My father, Jose Manuel Baca, was born in 1914 in Roy, New Mexico. Later, the family of 8 moved to Colorado, where they worked the beet fields as sharecroppers, and where my father married my mother, Lita Baca, from Pueblo, Colorado, and they began a family. I was the last of 3 daughters, born in a small white house on the farm where my family worked, all of them. I was born at home, which was common for poor people those days, but at least I was born in a real house. My sisters, Fernie and Polly Baca, were born in dirt floor shacks, which my mother scrubbed and cleaned as if they were palaces. She was very strict about cleanliness because she didn't want anybody calling us dirty Mexicans, as was common in those days. But they did anyway. We lived on the outskirts of a mixed low-income neighborhood in Greeley, Colorado. We got along with our white, we called them Anglos, neighbors. There was a Spanish colony 2 miles outside of town where others like us lived in a poor but close-knit community. Max has passed around some articles from the Greeley Tribune talking about the Ku Klux Klan in the Spanish colony, if any of you want to see it. It really did happen. Because of the discrimination, my mother wanted us to integrate and speak only English, even though my father would have preferred otherwise. In Greeley, listen to this, there were only Anglos and Mexicans, or Spanish-speaking as we were called. Believe it or not, I never met a Black person until I went to college. I never met a Jewish person. There were Jewish in town, but we never knew it. In my father's time, movie theaters were segregated so Mexicans could only sit in the balcony. But even in our own Catholic church, when I was small, it was segregated. We had to sit in the side sections. The center was reserved for Anglos. Nonetheless, my sisters and I did well, as we were gifted with amazing, hardworking, progressive parents. My father was a brilliant, quiet political activist. Like his father before him, he worked to organize the sugar beet workers for better wages and conditions. He was central to the establishment of another Catholic church in our town that didn't discriminate and that had a Spanish-speaking priest. And every night, at a meal consisting mostly of pinto beans, fried potatoes, and a stack of white bread, Daddy would talk about the news of the day, how we needed to support the working man, help the poor, and fight racism against Blacks as well as ourselves. He started a credit union in our church that he ran out of the house, working nights and weekends after coming home from a full day's work. We were 3 girls at a time when girls did not go to college. They were simply expected to get married, have children, and those who worked outside the home were relegated to factory work, farm work, or at the best, secretarial jobs. My parents would have none of that. From the very beginning, we knew we would go to college. It wasn't a choice. As a young woman, fresh out of college in the late 1960s, I worked first as a social worker for the War on Poverty in my Colorado community, visiting and helping families with children in the new Head Start program. After a year or so, I took a job as a juvenile group supervisor at Hillcrest Juvenile Hall in San Mateo, California. My parents had raised us to be independent, and then we were. My next job took me on a path that would guide the rest of my life. I became a VISTA supervisor. VISTA stood for Volunteers in Service to America. It was a kind of Peace Corps at home, where local volunteers could work to better their conditions in their own communities. I was sent to South Texas to supervise Latino volunteers in the Rio Grande Valley. I became deeply involved in the Chicano movement, which paralleled the civil rights movement in other parts of the country. For the first time, this shy, proper girl felt the freedom to be angry. I learned to organize, I marched, I gave speeches. I went to the 1963 March on Washington and the 1969 Chicano Moratorium in Los Angeles. The following year, I worked to organize a farm workers' council in western Kansas. I was trying to make a difference, an effort that continues to this day. At that time in the 1970s, Latinos were, and still are, predominantly Mexican American in the Southwest. Puerto Ricans were concentrated in the Northeast, and Cubans fleeing the revolution were changing the face of South Florida. There were less than 15 million of us. Over the years, our population has grown to 65 million. We are the largest minority. Mexican Americans are 40% of us. Stateside Puerto Ricans are about 6%. That does not include those on the island who also are American citizens. And those who account for 1 million or more include Cuba, El Salvador, the Dominican Republic, Guatemala, Colombia, and Honduras. Latinos have made immense contributions in all facets of American life, from the names of our states and cities to our food, art, music, literature, science, politics, and sports. When I was director of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus in the late 1980s, there were 13 Latino members. Now there are 52 Hispanic members of Congress. We are the fastest growing contributors to the U.S. economy, and our GDP ranks fifth largest in the world. Our GDP right here in this country. But we are not a monolith. Certainly, there are many similarities. We are family oriented, mostly Catholic, traditionally Democratic, but less so than before. We are Spanish speaking, and we're predominantly brown. There are also many differences. Some of us were overtaken, others came to work the fields and the railroads. Still, many still come to, to free oppression, hunger, and violence. And our food. People eat what they grow. In Colorado and New Mexico, we eat green chili, pinto beans, corn, and potatoes. My husband, who's right in front of us, his Puerto Rican family eats white rice, red beans, and a tamale-like delicacy that is made with root foods. Mexican tamales are made with a cornmeal dough and chili. Puerto Ricans don't eat chili. And the native dishes of El Salvador and Guatemala are foreign to me. So I'd like to acknowledge my husband, Alex Rodriguez, who is here. We met 38 years ago. He was a rather boisterous, talkative, annoying Puerto Rican from New York City. I was a rather reserved, proper Chicana from small town Colorado. And we met in Israel. We truly were a mixed couple. But we did share basic values, our love of family, and our devotion to civil rights causes. In doing so, I'd like to share a poem Alex wrote years ago. It's called Living in La Raza. Living in La Raza is a realization that we are not Asian, Indian, Black, Spanish, or white. We are mestizo, half, quarter, or even eighth breeds, always realizing that the concept of race is silly. We are all mankind. We live with the tension of a melting pot that doesn't melt, a mixed salad that has ingredients many don't like. We carry 6 races on our shoulders and ask to pick our favorite, many of us choose. I am Puerto Rican except in Puerto Rico. I am Black except in Harlem. I am Indian except on the reservation. I am Asian because from my Indian roots, but my Asian cousins can't see it. I am Spanish except in Spain, and I am forced to betray the white man that I am. I celebrate my ancestors' cuisine, but depend on my wife and sisters to eat it. My children can't cook it. Oh, how I long for mommy's rice and beans. I'm a racist, sexist, homophobe, and sometimes self-hater when I try to take sides. I want to be none of these, so I try not to take sides. The society drives me to pick, choose. Who are you? Where do you come from? What about your grandfathers? Where did they come from? Be like me, no, be like us. No, we are better. When did they come? I'll be your friend if you let me tell racist, sexist, and homophobic jokes. Well, then what about a dumb blonde jokes? I hear, that's a Puerto Rican thing, said right in front of me. I get rejected as Latino, but then I get called to translate. They believe language is genetically passed on. I bond with those who want to be anti-racist and all-inclusive, but they are not. They're like me, struggling to figure it out. They don't see that we are winning. They don't understand how it's all going to be settled. I have an advantage because I'm the kid who ran home after being beaten up and called spick and other racial epithets. I'm the one who asked the wise woman, the spiritualist, the one who cures, my mother. Mommy, what would happen if everybody intermarried, white with black and Asian with Spanish? She stopped her ironing, thought for a second, and at last said in her beautiful Spanish, well, mijo, if that happens, the whole world will be Puerto Rican. We are la raza. I will deny none nor favor any. I will be all. Through me you come, and with me you get there. I am a bridge to cross. I am a bridge to use. Crossover. Thank you. Questions? Say hello, Alex. Stand up and say hello. Wasn't that a lovely poem he wrote? When we met, we really felt like we were an interracial couple. I said mixed couple because I didn't know my audience, but we really did because he's from New York City, the East, and I'm from Northern Colorado. I had more in common with Anglos where I lived, and he had more in common with Jewish people and African Americans where he lived. We really were kind of an interracial couple. But I think the poem tells us how we all belong to one another and have so much in common. Questions?
So many of our, I'm going to stick with US citizens, they look at Latin America, Hispanics as one monolith, as you stated earlier. How do we change that?
You've hit on a pet peeve of mine. Does anybody think the country is run by the East Coast? I do. When I said that half of Latinos are basically from the southwestern part of the United States, and that we're 65 million strong, you don't hear that. You don't hear that. You don't hear about those of us who have been here for years, hundreds of years. We're the ones who never crossed the border. You don't hear about that. New York, the whole East Coast is really dominant in the media in our country, right? And so we don't get a picture. What we get a picture of in the Southwest is the rush to the borders, right?
We have a tradition in our club of honoring our speakers by planting a tree. And this is a certificate that commemorates that for you. And a pin. We will send you GPS coordinates when it gets planted. And you can even go and visit your tree. It'll be in the, say what?
See where it's at.
Yeah,
What a lovely thought. Thank you so much.
thank you.